Alan Abrone with ARA Self-Empowerment Podcast. Another episode with a hot topic that we have going on today. And so before I dive right on into this hot topic, I want you to do me a favor and go over to YouTube. I want you to like, share, and hit that notification button on our YouTube channel, ARA Self-Empowerment. Now, we have a following on Facebook. So I desire for you that are under the sound of my voice to go over to Facebook, ARA Self-Empowerment Podcast. I want you to follow us on Facebook. That's ARA Self-Empowerment Podcast. Now, we're all about community impact over profit. This podcast, ARA Self-Empowerment, is all about community impact over profit. We're all about tearing down destructive practices, destructive teachings, and our desire is to help educate African Americans in all races, all people, regardless of gender, background. It is our hope to educate you, to enlighten you, and help you to help your family and your community and those that are around you. So don't forget to go over to YouTube. I want you to like, share, and hit that notification button. And so today's topic is concerning mental health throughout the African American community. Mental health throughout the African American community. This is a hot topic, a much needed topic. We need to address mental health within the African American community, in our homes, our churches, buildings, educational facilities, throughout the criminal justice system, our so-called communities. I have a lot to talk about. Don't have enough time to hit everything. And I've addressed some of these topics, or possibly even most of them, throughout many of my episodes. And so I'm going to try my best to do it justice and hit again on these different various topics. And so where do we start when it comes to mental health within or throughout the African American community? And I want to go back and say this again. This is not just about African Americans. It doesn't matter what race or subscription that you subscribe yourself to, so to speak. I desire to address you as well. I desire to help you as well. And so if you can do me a favor, reach out to some of your friends, some of your loved ones, your children, pastors, ministers, civic leaders, politicians, law enforcement, wherever you are. Reach out, send this video to as many as you can to help throughout the community. We know we can't change the world, change the community, but we can help the remnant and help those who desire to be helped. Okay. And so we're going to dive right on into mental health throughout the African American community. And there is a need for improvement in mental health. Now, the main problem with mental health when it comes to the African American community, it's in all other communities too now. Don't get me wrong, but I'm focusing on the African American community because of all the different racial groups and ethnicity. The most problems that happens are within the African American community. Let me qualify that. This is not to say that I subscribe to the notion that we see here today within the United States that African Americans commit the most crimes, African Americans are the most violent, African Americans lead in abortion. So let's break it down. African Americans do everything bad. And so I don't subscribe to that notion. But I do subscribe to the fact that African Americans are the most noticed. They are the most targeted. They are the most misdiagnosed. They are the most pathologized. And not rightfully so, but understandably so. Because over 500 years, Africans were enslaved like no other. Now, we can talk about indentured servitude. We can talk about all of the attempts to try to take the focus off of what happened over the last 500 years from the late 1500s all up until 1965. We can try our best to try to, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about indentured service. Let's talk about the St. Patrick's Day. Let's talk about the Irish, the Chinese. Okay, not a problem. But let's stay on focus. Let's talk about the mental health throughout the African American community. And let's talk about why there is so much pathology within the African American community. Why is there so much oppression? Why is there so much bad mental health? And one of the things, one of the main things that I desire to focus on is a self-defense mechanism called denial. And there's a correlation with denial in both races, the ones that had something to do with slavery, which is the European race, aka the white race, as they put it, and the African or African American race, aka the black or the Negro race. And it kind of reminds me of the Time Machine. I don't know if any of you have ever watched the Time Machine, and I love the Time Machine, especially the later version the newer version, where you had a race of people at the top and a race of people at the bottom. They were both from the human race or the human species, but the bottom race was eating on the top. And they had gotten in a position where they needed the people at the top because at the bottom they couldn't grow any foods or had any agriculture. And we pretty much see that today. We see that that's what pretty much started slavery. There were people that needed resources, they needed things done, and they saw a group of people that they could exploit and use. And they did that. And we see that today in society today. And so when we start talking about denial, when you're trying to deal with something, people have what they call self-defense mechanism. These are more so mechanisms that help you to defend yourself or deflect. It's almost like emotional security. I've engaged in emotional security. I'm sure most of you, under the sound of my voice, you engage in emotional security. This is why African Americans have the best comedians. Laughter is a form of self-defense mechanism. I was good at laughing because I was not good at it. I was hurt. I was dealing with a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. So when you see a lot of comedians within the African American community, it's because the African American community is trying to deal with pain and trying to deal with hurt. And so we're good at creating self-defense mechanisms. We're good at laughing at ourselves before someone else can laugh at us. And what you have today is very unfortunate. It's extremely unfortunate. It's extremely unfortunate when we start looking at our women. And let's deal with that. I don't have a lot of time, but let's deal with this. One of the focal points I desire to speak on two women, and I will try my best to stay on topic. That's so much on the information that I have to talk about. I'm trying my best. And so let's deal with two women that I've been watching. Well, three. I desire to deal with three. And those three women is Kamala Harris. I think her name is Jasmine Crockett, and Michelle Obama. Two of the three I highly looked up to, still do. And one of them I misunderstood. I could relate to Michelle Obama and I could relate to Jasmine Crockett, but pretty much at some point in my life, I despised somewhat secretly, and I have to confess, Kamala Harris. I kind of despised her. But after listening to her, and I couldn't say, I guess it was a form of conceptualization because I would see her on television, not that I was in her presence, but I guess it was almost like being in her presence. I began to understand Kamala Harris. And when Kamala Harris lost the election, I really hurt for her. Man, I felt it all in my bones. This was a person that I despised, who was the Attorney General of California. But after having the opportunity to listen to her, having a feminine looking husband, he seemed like he's, feminine, perverted somewhat. That's not to say he is, because I don't know the man, but he just has effeminate mannerism. And it just threw me off. So I kind of pretty much I wasn't feeling Kamala Harris. But now I understand them. And you said, why did you pick all three of those women? Because this is a part of the mental health within the African American community. And many of the European Americans who have pathology and have bad mental health, there is a correlation. Okay. When you look at European Americans, aka white people, we're going to get back to Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett, and Michelle Obama. When you look at the correlation between African Americans, aka black Negroes, that they, I don't believe we're black or Negroes, but this is for you that believe you're black and you're Negro, because some of you are because you were created that way. And so you have this group of people who came from descended from the African community. Then you have a group of people that descended from the European experience, and those are crackers, hunkies, rednecks. I don't call you that. I'm just calling what people call it, or dirty, or they call white trash. Okay. But there's a correlation between Negroes and black people and hunkies and crackers and rednecks. It's called poverty and ignorance, exploitation. Most of the people who fought the Confederate War with hunkies and crackers and white trash, those are the ones that lost their lives for something they possibly couldn't even afford to own, being taken advantage of by rich Europeans. They're not hunkies, they're not crackers, they're not rednecks. They call them not anarchy, but what they call them, I got the word for it, but in other words, they were elite. They were elite. They were supposed to be a part of a group of people, monarchs, and descended from kings and queens and stuff like that. And so the rest of you so-called hunkies and let me say this, I'm not calling you hunky because I don't believe that. I'm talking about what they call you. Okay. Hunkies, crackers, peckerwoods, and white trash. And then you got the niggas and the Negroes that they use. And so the hunkies and the crackers were just a step ahead, if that, just pretty much that much ahead of a nigga and a Negro. And that's still today. And those are the main ones that run around with rebel flag. You probably if you got $500 in the bank. But you say make America great again so that you can at least feel like you feel about something. That's something about all people, regardless of your so-called privilege or your so-called race. Everybody wants to look down on somebody to make themselves look good. Everybody wants to tear somebody down to feel like I'm something. I get it. And so you have to understand that. I'm going to get back to this Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett, and Michelle Obama. I'm hold that thought. And so when you see the correlation is really, you don't have none. It's an illusion. Both of you being played. But I'm talking about the mental health in the African American community. The mental health in the African American community is that no matter how you try and what you do, you have a lot of people in denial. You're in denial. You really believe in the human capital theory that if you work hard enough, if I do whatever, that, hey, guess what? I will be accepted. If I go out here, man, you can work 5 jobs. And some people your mama was a nigga, you a nigga, your daddy was a nigga, and you will always be a nigga. That's how some people look at it. Your mama was a hunky, your grandma was a hunky, and you will always be one. No matter what you do. I don't care how many baths you take. That's in the minds of people. And so when these derogatory terms that I'm using, that people use, that I don't use, they are created by rich people how they see you. They didn't even ask you if you're a nigga or not. This is what I'm calling you. And these same group of people have embraced it. They've embraced it. You say, well, what are we getting with these 3 women? Well, when you have a lot of hurt, that means that we know we have God. We know we have Jesus and the Holy Spirit. These 3 are one. And Jesus prayed. He said, Lord, make them one as we are one, right? And so Jesus prays and makes intercession for us on the right hand of the Father. Am I right? And there is God that covers us. He made this greenhouse effect. Even though it's cold outside in space, God has created the world where it's warm and everything our needs are met, right? So that's called a covering. And so what you have a lot of African American women who have turned into niggas and bees and Negroes without a covering. And let me get this straight. This is not to say that a African American woman should not hold herself accountable and have responsibility. I think that's another podcast because I wouldn't have enough time to talk about all the accountability and the responsibility. But there has to be a balance there. But a woman and a daughter should have a covering, should have a father, a big brother, a dad, a grandfather to cover them. And when a woman or young girl does not have a father figure or a true father, I'm not talking about a sugar daddy or a pimp or whatever. I'm not talking about a groomer or I'm gonna groom this fresh meat up to when she get to a certain age. Now this Philly mine, I'm gonna have sex with her when she get right. All that grooming stuff like they did slaves, and we're not talking about that. I'm talking about a true father. And understand, this is not to say that Kamala Harris didn't have a father, that Michelle Obama didn't have a father, that Jasmine Crockett didn't have a father. Of those three, Michelle Obama seemed to be more intact. This is not to say Jasmine Crockett is not. What I mean by that, you see a more sense of sure of yourself. This is not to say Jasmine Crockett and Kamala Harris is not sure of themselves, but it seems that one tried to, at some point, to assimilate and understand the dominant culture, to understand that I have no win. And that's Kamala Harris. She, at some point, and I think later in life, she when she ran for president, I feel like she wanted to make amends for that. That's what I felt. I could be wrong. But at some point, when you hear people saying that Kamala Harris is not black, there lies mental health. There lies pathology. How is that woman not African American or so-called black? Because it was the Spanish that called Africans Negroes, which is another form of being black. They just grouped them all by the pigmentation of the skin. Forget your language, forget your history, your ancestry, your genealogy. We don't care about that. You look black, all of you. Just group them together. And so here you have people saying you're not black. Even Biden said you're not black. What constitutes black? I mean, do you do a DNA test? Do you draw blood? Or do you just go off of pathology, character, so to speak, how you act, how you talk? And generally, African Americans who have transitioned to two kind of divisions. Some of them call themselves black, some call it Negroes, but they're both the same because black and Negro is the same. The problem is that to be black, it requires a level of disrespect, a level of cussing and profanity. Be out, slap the. Really, it requires a disdain of not speaking to. It's always the violation. That's mental health within the African American community. Is being so mean. If I can be just mean and nasty and fight you and all of this kind of stuff, but now, as I was talking about this part of the European American and the African American, you see that on both sides. If you go into a town where there is a high level of redneck, so to speak, hunkies and crackers, there will be one common denominator within the so-called Negro and black community and the redneck, cracker, and white trash community. And that will be high school dropouts, barely with a high school education. Most of it is straight ignorance. Most of it. I'm saying most of the pathology and the bad mental health within both communities. It doesn't matter if it's the white trailer trash or the Negro, so to speak. It will always be ignorance. It will always be some 8th grade education stuff. It would always be that. So the common denominator of all of this mental health within the African American community is poor test grades, is poor education. And it's always in our churches. You have women want to be pastors who were possibly were in a bad relationship or in bad situations, who have taken on masculine roles, and then you want to come into the church with this masculine. I was hearing one lady, and I won't call her by name, but she was talking about Deborah's raw. Okay, wait a minute. The last time I checked, wasn't it the male lions that were roaring? I mean, female lions do roar some, but the male lion roar. Here, this woman is bringing in a masculine role into the house of God, and the woman has a husband, and he's not correcting that. That is what I'm talking about, mental health. And because you don't have a mugshot, because you've never been to jail, does not exempt you from pathology or bad mental health. And that's one of the problems. If you listen to read Michelle Alexander's book, she acknowledges that there was a point in her life who she is a lawyer. She acknowledges that she was one of the ones that always said that if African American men, especially us, that if we worked hard enough, and she was all about stop making excuses. And she said she started looking into the facts. And wow. She was wow. Because she was one of the ones, and I think that Kamala Harris was like Michelle Alexander. I think she was caught up in this I'm included, and then you start looking at the fact people have a right to grow. People have a right to change. And so what we see here today, when we look at Michelle Obama, we look at Jasmine Crockett, when we look at Kamala Harris, we see one person who they say is not black, who possibly had learned how to deal with European Americans. She learned how to survive. She might have had a father, but just because you had a father doesn't mean the father understands what he's dealing with. If he understands how to protect his daughter. There's a lot of African American men or Negroes or niggers, or so to speak, that don't understand the whole world as they're dealing with. So that translates, I don't know how to cover you. All I know how to do is just stay out of the way, so to speak. I don't know how to really defend my daughter or defend my son, let alone tell him how to defend himself other than to comply. Always, yes, sir, no, sir. I don't know how to tell you how to stand up for yourself and articulate yourself without losing your life, of saying you're defiant. How many times have you seen dark-skinned African-American women trying to lighten up their skin, trying to change their complexion? Case in point, Serena Williams. I seen a picture of her. It's sad. The woman just changed her whole look, like she's trying to look like she's of European descent. Wow. She has learned that the power rests with the dominant culture. So what we have is that we have women who are trying to find their place without a covering, feeling left out, feeling exposed. I can't tell, feeling vulnerable. When you look at Jasmine Crockett, as much as she's trying, and I can applaud her, she's trying her best. But at the same time, even what she's trying to do as being a lawyer, you can be a lawyer, but you still may be missing something. And maybe she has a father in her life, because I haven't did any research about that. But it shows in the fact that with these wigs and fake eyelashes and nails, and this is not to put her down, it just reeks of being attributed to harlotry. Not that she is a harlot. I don't believe that she's a harlot, but she's taking on something that's attached to something that need not to be attached. You see people today, I was reading a quote. Let me read this quote right quick that I read. Someone said, it said, to me, church isn't just a building. I want to show you this point about, I read this point in here. Jesus wasn't stuck in four walls wearing a suit. Well, Jesus didn't wear a suit because suits wasn't invented. But my point is, Jesus understood dressing proper too. And this is the problem within the African American community when it comes to pathology and bad mental health. We are so busy trying to fight against racism and how the dominant culture has treated us that we in turn create another problem. I get it. You don't have to be phony and fake, but at the same time, if I'm trying to deal with Massa Reynolds, I don't need to go run to Massa Moore. That's the point. See, Reynolds was religious. He was a plantation owner in the movie Roots. And then Moore was dirty chicken for him or whatever he was doing. And he was just nasty and dirty, just messing with all the slaves, having sex with them, just raping them, whatever. You know. So this is my point. You don't want that. And so my point is that what we're dealing with is when we see a lot of our women, young women and stuff with problems, it starts in their early age. I was talking to someone and they was telling me about a relative of theirs who grew up, and then the relative, and I saw them, they're a nice looking young lady, and they went and had a baby with somebody else, and they're supposed to be gay, but they were homosexual or perverted, whatever, but they had several children. So somewhere you like men because you had 2 children. And people say, well, just because you had kids doesn't mean you're not what they call homosexual gay. Okay. Well, what it says is that there is a social problem. There is a mental disorder. There is an issue going on in your head. And most things that happen to young ladies is when they're around men. If you look at almost most of the women who are perverted, homosexual, they're hoes. All you have to do is trace it back to their childhood. Somewhere that young lady had some issues going on that created some things in their childhood. And that childhood is how you see the world. You see. And so when you look at Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett, and Michelle Obama, go back to their childhood. And those three women are indicative of the whole world, the community, when it comes to African Americans or blacks and Negroes. Either you're going to take on some things from the so-called culture that you shouldn't, and it doesn't matter how much education, because we're talking about three lawyers. And you heard Jasmine Crockett say, you know what? Listen to what Jasmine Crockett said. This is what she said. She was doing an interview, and Jasmine Crockett said, well, if you look at the study said that black women are the most educated, fastest growing educated of all people. Now she's talking black power, so to speak. But in the statement, she said black women. She didn't say anything about African American men. She was gloating in her womanness, of her black womanness. Now, that's a clue. This is not to put Jasmine Crockett down. I'm rooting for you, sister. But it is to show you the mental health in the African American community. Because whether she feels this or not, I'm not going to speak for her. But there are a lot of African American women don't feel covered by African American men, but don't understand that African American men don't have the numbers. They are being targeted just like you from their youth. How do you think they got a big 280-pound African to do whatever? He's just like a big bull. If that bull is raised by the owner, that bull is going to do whatever the master tells him, because he is bonding. He was raised that way. You raise a dog has the power to bite you and break your arm. But if you raise him from a puppy, he has allegiance to you. So African women and African American women are boasting in things that you shouldn't boast in. It is to say that you are the fastest growing or the most educated among the whole, what you want to call it, black experience, is an indication of slavery, oppression, and being profiled. It is by design. And it shows in the way you dress. The fact that you sit up there with these wigs and fake eyelashes and using this profanity and being angry, and I get it. I understand. You should be angry. You're mad because it's just, but you're not thinking, wait a minute, let me bag up. I don't have to cuss to get my point across. I don't have to wear weaves to be beautiful. I don't need all this fakeness. And if I understand that I'm the fastest growing educated among everybody, then that means that something's going on with my brothers and my daddies and my uncles and our men. And we don't need to wait till they big like Jella Beezy and MO3 and Little Wayne or whatever and Rick Ross and all these people. We need to say, wait a minute, we need to start going back to the elementary schools. We need to start guarding our youth. This is one of the reasons that I was very a proponent of my stepdaughter, being around her mother, because it wasn't so much as that I felt like, oh, her mother shouldn't do this and do that. I knew that it is very important that a child to be on top of, especially a young girl, and especially a young boy that is African American. It is important to be there when their moods are changing, to know what's going on, to know when they're being violated or mistreated or bullied and talked about. Because if not, they are developing insecurities. Their worldview is being shaped. And this is why we had so many people voting for Donald Trump. Because somebody got a hold to them when they were young to tell them, oh, be colorblind, black, quit all this black, white stuff, whatever you you work hard enough, you can make it. And this is why we have black people, not African Americans, voting for Donald Trump with this mindset that slavery was in the past. Quit talking about that stuff. That's been over 400 years ago, but you're going to dismiss generational transmission process. You're going to dismiss the fact that a person after 24 to 48 hours, the first thing that begins to develop is the central nervous system. So this is their pathology, their mother's pathology, their dad pathology is transmitted in 24 to 40 hours to the child. Not in 2 months, not in 10 years, in 24 to 48 hours. We're going to just dismiss that. And so what we fail to realize is that the Negro, the black man, is how Portuguese, the Spanish, Europeans, so to speak, how they see you. They're not even concerned about how you see yourself. That's the big deal about black and white. Black was created by them. They're not reaching out to Ghana. They're not trying to reach out to Mali and ask them, what do you see yourself? What is your tribe? What is your language? Forget what you say. It's what I say. And that lies pathology. That lies mental health. There has to be something when somebody can just break you down and tell you, this is what I'm going to call you. It doesn't matter what you say. You can talk to the average European American or European and tell them that you're not black. They're going to say, what you mean? It's what they're going to give you the definition. See, black, it means you. Were you born in Africa? Then you're not an African American. It's how they say. Now, if you turn around and tell them that they're not white, they're going to look at you. So hold up. We're the dominant culture. We tell you. It's like in the movie, The Black Godfather. I think the Godfather of Harlem, I think that's what it was. He said, that's me over you. He was trying to tell Bumpy that I'm over you. That's me over you. And that's how European men see things. They see, I'm over you. I'm over your woman. I'm over your children. I run this. I tell you when your kids can come to school. I tell you when you can take them out or not. I run your house. I run your woman. Is that not slavery? This is why you have so much problem with when you have a white, so-called white police and a pedestrian. That's because the mindset, I'm over you. I tell you what to do. And the moment you question their authority, it's a problem. And then if you talk about that to the black Negro or the black, which is the same race card, that's mental health. When you can question pathology, abnormal behavior, and people can look at you as a problem. Just like I was talking about grooming. If you groom a child up to a certain way, then whenever you get ready to rape them, because if they're underage, you're raping them. And even if you do it later, you're still raping them technically because you took the whole time to get in their head. Isn't that the same thing that Europeans did to slaves? They grew them up that way. And then when they call them niggas, it's, oh man, he cool like that. You groom this person to be a slave. This is why when you go into most small towns where there are African Americans or black people, so to speak, you see white people. I saw this so-called white man call another brother a nigger. And I guess he was a nigger because he made him. And the brother didn't see no problem with it. I do agree there are niggers and Negroes, and they are people that were created by Europeans to be their slave, to do what I tell you to do and like it and love it. Love it, like it. Wow. Isn't that what happens when you have a Tyler Perry who was created? Now he loves it. He embraces it. The hoes, they love it, embrace it. Just like in the movie Django, and he tell everybody to get out, and he said, but I ain't talking about, she said, I know you weren't talking about me. Officer Tatum, look at all the people who speak for the so-called establishment. When you look at them, they got a white wife, so to speak, what they call white, or a Hispanic wife. Look, Hispanic. They're all going to come to you. What can you do that I can't do? I heard a guy say that on social media. Name one thing that a black man, so-called black man, can do, can't do, that I can, or name something that he can't do that a white man can. Name one thing that a black man can't do that a white man can, and I can name that real quick for you. A black man can never, never say that he is white, ever been white, and he can never say that over the last 500 years that we were the dominant culture. You can never say that. That's the one thing. And that within itself speaks volume on everything else. This is why when they get mad at you, they want to say, we freed you from slavery, but that's double-bind communication. How did you free me from slavery when you said that Africans own slaves too? See how they double talk? You say that black people own slaves too. We wasn't the only one owned slaves. They did too. Well, then why are you saying you freed me then? Did I free myself? How do you know I didn't free myself? If Africans fought in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and in every war, why is it y'all the only one freed us? Why we didn't help free ourselves? You see, ownership. See, that's all about mental health. The fact, that's what reparations should be about. See, so-called white people want to maintain that superiority edge, that I owned you, that I freed you, and I can turn around and put you back. I maintain control over you. I can always talk about you. I can always look down on you. That's all about Adlerian therapy. If you look at Jim Adler or Adlerian therapy, and they go back and trace it, children as young as 3 and 5, they want to look down at each other. You see that in the Bible. Children, sibling rivalry has always wanted to look down on somebody. You see the same thing in the church. You see the same thing in the African American community, where in a family, they are trying to one up one another, look down on each other, and then it rolls over into economics. This is why we have a lack of economic empowerment. It's always, I'm different though. See, I'm not like them. I'm different. And so here we see the lack of empowerment in the community is because African Americans who are not African Americans, Negroes and niggers who were created by the European American experiment, who have a lot of pathology, a lot of bad mental health, they will not support one another. They like to reach out and struggle separately. You over here trying to struggle, whereas other races have knowledge of how to come together. This is passed down. Generational curses is AKA generational choices. It's not so much, we look at generational curses like a spirit, which is a spirit, but it's really a choice. It's bad choices. It's a bad choice not to support somebody that looks like you, that's going to struggle like you, that's going to deal with marginalization like you, that's going to deal with microaggressions like you, that will be profiled like you. It would seem common sense for you to work together, but we don't. Because it's taught to not trust one another. It's taught to look down on one another. It's taught to be mean. And so when we look at the 3 women that I spoke about, Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, you see Michelle Obama is married to Barack Obama. Michelle Obama, like Kamala Harris, like Jasmine Crockett, although she is different, somewhat more firmer than Kamala Harris, and more firmer than Jasmine Crockett, there is a sense of weakness that I see in Kamala Harris, unlike the other 2. Then there is a sense of ignorance, so to speak, even though she's very intelligent in Jasmine Crockett, that I don't see in Michelle Obama. But there is a sense of defiance that I see in Michelle Obama. And the defiance is not like what white people try to see as having a penis and being a man. The defiance is understanding the world better than the other 2, having a higher knowledge than them, almost like Black Pantherish, that understanding that, man, they making fools out of and being mad and want to press the gas, but having not the power to do it, so to speak. Want to go another direction, you see. And Michelle Obama is married to a man who wants to assimilate, who wants to get along, to get along. Hey, let's just agree to get along. And you can see that with the beer fest, how you talking to a man who referring to your wife with a penis, bro. And so you can see the defiance, the anger. Everyone want a man to stand up, I remember looking at the movie Troy, and this is how I look at it. You don't have to win every fight, but man, be in it. Fight them, do something, spit on them, hold them, grab them, throw something. Just fight back. And I remember looking at the movie Troy when his son the dude was getting, and his daddy said, son, get up, fight back, fight back. He wasn't so concerned about the man losing, his son losing. I don't even think he was concerned about his son dying. He was just, don't run, don't stand up. And I think a lot of women, African-American women, want African-American men just to stand up, man, say something back. Talk back, stand up, say something. Just say anything. If somebody hits you in your head, just swing back. Bite them, grab them, pull on them. You don't. And there lies the problem, what you see with those three. It's not so much as Kamala Harris is not black, so to speak. Kamala Harris was black. She's more African American now. She grew up. And I think she did that as the vice president. She was black and she was a Negro in California. When she got to the White House, she became African. And that was not so much as the vote. That was a maturation. That was an evolution. Michelle Obama is African American. Now, Jasmine Crockett is an educated Negro. I just have to say, I like her. She's a Negro still. She has not grew. She has a lot more work to do on becoming up. She's an educated, but you're a Negro because you're trying to fight the system. But you know what? The system made you. You don't see it. I remember somebody told me that. They said, man, I said, I ain't like him. He said, yeah, you just don't know it. So a lot of times we can be like somebody we despise, but not know it. And then once we see ourselves, we grow. And when we look at Michelle Obama, Jasmine Crockett, Kamala Harris, it is an indictment against African American men. It is an indictment against our failure, our weakness, our brokenness, our failure to cover our women. I admit they're doing a lot of stuff wrong. We can talk about that on another episode. But the fact of the matter is, it is an indictment against us as men. Bottom line. When you see women going from one man to another, when you see all this being fragile, all this brokenness, this is because of the weakness and the violations that we allow as African men and African American men, that we have not stood up and been firm and willing to die. That's the problem. And this is why we have so much bad mental health. This is why we see so many holes when it comes to African American women, because somewhere the father was absent and he allowed your daughter to be molested by somebody, or somebody to get on her, and that you wasn't there to cover her and correct that. I'm not saying they should not be held accountable and hold themselves responsible. That's another topic. We're talking about male failure within the African American community. We failed. And to look at those three women right there who have all this education, but in all their education still have not the might as a lion. How do we know this? Look at, when you look at an animal show, you can see all those female lions taking down those hyenas, and they'll just be, but once that male lion come in, once he show up, woo, everybody get to run. And in reality, they got the power to over, it's a lot of them versus a lion. But who gonna take that first bite? That's what they try to figure out, which one gonna take the bite. And I'm gonna tell you something about being a man. It doesn't matter if the police can beat you up. It doesn't matter if so-called white people can beat you up. It's the fact that Most white people want you to bow down. They don't want to beat you down, because if you stand up for yourself, even if they win, you become a martyr. You become somebody that was defiant. They want you to voluntarily say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. They want you to lay your beard down. See, it's no fun in killing somebody who fought back. It's really good when you lay down. You break their will. See, and that's what's going on in the United States of America. Many African American men, or black men, so to speak, they were once African. They went from Africans to black Negroes, and now we need to go from Negroes to Hebrews, meaning born again. And the mental health in it is that our women are suffering from bad mental health. They don't really have a covering. They're angry. They're mad. And then we want to say that they're defiant. They're butches. They like dudes. And some of them are butches because they have evolved. And they're in the church, preaching in the church, talking about God called me to be a pastor. Now you're trying to run the church like a man because the failure of dealing with your pathology, dealing with your issues. And then you have about 10, 15% of black people, because they're not African Americans, making all this money and just sitting there won't say nothing. Some of them are saying something. Let me say that. Let me be fair about it. But too many are not. Too many are silent. Too many are tap dancing around the true issues. And that's why we have a Michelle Obama who looks like she's defiant. Michelle Obama sees the world like it should be seen. Now, I don't agree with her it doesn't matter who you love, and that's going too far. But that's the point. When you don't have strong African American men, it gets out of hand, and it has gotten out of hand. Well, we have allowed abuse, pathology, and embraced it, where our women and young boys were raped and molested, and it has evolved into perversion and homosexuality. Now we have signed a deal with the LGBT community where it's associated with being an African American. Wow. It's associated with being an African American. Now we are the poster or the bulletin board of the LGBT community. And then we have educated people like Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett. You see the world like I see, but to get votes, you have to take on the byproduct or the evolution of what the oppressor has put in us by raping our daughters, abusing our sons. And now we got like D Wade's son evolving. And then we want to say, well, leave him alone. He a part of it. We don't have strong men. And look how they are running behind Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not mincing words. He's saying. Now, our women are speaking more like men. Is it? Because where are the African American men that can get up like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali? Something happened, didn't it? And we see some of them up talking, but you're talking and speaking from the wrong view. The homosexual community, LGBT community, has nothing to do with the African American experience, other than the fact that many African Americans were raped, molested, and mistreated, and they are the byproduct or the evolution of that. So that means that's mental problems. That's something that needs to be dealt with. I can't say that that's African American. I can say that's what the result of what they did to many of our people. So as I close this podcast today, this is about mental health within the African American community. We need to do something about it. And what we need to do, you say, well, what do we need to do? What we need to do, and I've said this before, I'm going to keep hammering on it. We need to focus on our African American young men, our boys. Not to say we don't need to focus on our young girls, because we do, but we need to get a hold to our men. We need to, just like the hip hop, the rap industry, and other people are targeting our young men, we need to find a way to grab these men and start teaching them and educating them. We also need to help the LGBT community in the form of education and prayer and mental health. But we need to make a divide, meaning this is the African American community, this is blacks and Negroes, and this is the LGBT community. Those that are healed with your African Americans need to be putting programs together for Negroes and niggas that they can be incorporated. And we definitely need to put programs together for education and healing and deliverance for the LGBT community. They have no business being associated with the African American community. We shouldn't vote with them. And I don't care if we don't get our president in office. We need a third party, or we possibly need to have a remnant in our own community. And possibly one day, our own nation until Jesus come back. The church and the African American community, which should be trying to make their way to being Hebrew, had better make sure they find a way to come together as a community, as a nation, as a remnant, to have somewhere to go and to be waiting on Jesus. In other words, a landing pad. You need somewhere to get out of this nation. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but you need to find a way to separate from the Republican Party and separate from the Democratic Party, and definitely so separate from the LGBT. So when fire comes down from heaven, that let it hit them, and we're over here waiting on you in this landing pad. I hope you keep tuning in. Don't forget to tune in to our YouTube channel, ARA Self Empowerment, and our Facebook page, ARA Self Empowerment Podcast.